Hello, my name is Nathan Taylor, also known as Sockmatician, and this is one of a series of tutorials detailing the different ways of correct yarn management when triple knitting, depending on how you hold your yarns. Triple knitting, I mean, of course, the three-layered knitting technique, not just knitting with three colours. I've got three layers in my fabric here, a top layer, a middle layer, and a bottom layer, and they each are made with a stitch of a different colour. In this particular swatch here, you can see that I've got a section where the colour of the top layer is pink, which is my yarn A, over in this position on the finger here on the far right. I've got a section where the top layer is made with the yarn B, and this is my yarn B position, the blue in the centre. And I've got a section here where the stitches are on the top layer are created with the yarn C, and that's the yarn here over on the left. So the yarn A, B and C, those names really apply to the finger positions rather than the yarn colours itself. If you're working triple knitting back and forth, when you turn the work over, of course the colours are going to change, but the mechanics don't change depending on what position you are getting each yarn from. So for me, it makes more sense to think about A, B and C as these positions here rather than the actual colours of the yarn. In triple knitting in the round, all sets of 3 stitches are worked as knit, knit, purl, because in triple knitting in the round, you're only working the fabric from one side, and the middle layer faces the same way as the top layer. So that's 2 knit layers and then a purl layer underneath. If, however, you are working backwards and forwards, then on the return rows, you also need to take into account that the middle layer will have turned over, and that will be worked as a purl layer, so you'll actually be working knit, purl, purl on the way back. These, however, are the knit, knit, purl sets, and they, with a yarn A stitch on top, we're going to be working them in the order ABC. That order ABC is alphabetical, obviously, and for all of these different sets of stitches, that order just rotates. So when we start with letter B, we then work on C for the middle layer and A for the bottom layer, and if we start with C, we then go to A for the middle layer and B for the bottom layer. The principles for all of these things, this triple knitting as a whole, are all exactly the same. You work the stitch for the top layer, bring that yarn forward, work the stitch for the middle layer, bring that yarn forward, then work the stitch for the bottom layer, and then take the yarns to the back. But of course, depending on whether you're making a knit stitch or a purl stitch at any one time, it dictates whether your yarn is going to be behind or in front of the needle when you create each stitch. So it does make a difference. And the positions on the fingers mean that some of the yarns will be trickier to get access to without tangling the layers up than others. So that's what this tutorial is designed to sort out for you. Firstly, I'm going to knit the stitch with yarn A. I'm going to bring that yarn to the front. Then I'm going to knit the second stitch of the set with yarn B, keeping it there in the centre. I'm going to bring yarn B to the front and yarn C. Now, that's really important because I'm just about to purl with yarn C, so obviously we're going to need it to be at the front of the work. Purl with that one, and you can see there all 3, 1, 2, 3 layers, all nice and separate, and the yarns then go to the back of the work. Knit with yarn A, bring it to the front, knit with yarn B, bring it and yarn C to the front, remembering that yarn A is already there, purl with yarn C, and take all 3 yarns to the back once more. Knit with yarn A, bring it to the front, and knit with yarn B. B and C come to the front, remembering A is already there, purl with yarn C, and yarns to the back. It's not that difficult, it's just remembering what's supposed to be in front of the needle and what's supposed to be behind it at any given point. Knit with yarn A, yarn to the front, knit with yarn B, yarn to the front and C, purl with yarn C, taking the yarns to the back. Now we get to the position in the swatch where we want to start creating our sets with the yarn in position B on the top layer. We're going to cycle through the colours B, C, A each time, as you can see here, B, C, A, working along the stitches there. So the first thing to do is you knit the stitch for the top layer with yarn B, and then bring that one on its own to the front. And then you're going to knit the second stitch of the set with yarn C. Now what we want to do here is we want to bring yarns C and then A to the front, because we're about to purl with yarn A. But because we've already got B in the middle at the front, it's actually easier to drop B to the back and then bring all the yarns forward en masse before purling yarn C and taking the yarns to the back to continue. So let's show you that again. We've got, let's just separate my yarns there. We've got a knit with yarn B, bring yarn B to the front and knit with yarn C, drop B to the back, all to the front, and purl with yarn A. There we go. Let's do that a couple more times so you get more familiar with the order of movements. So we'll knit with yarn B, bring B to the front, knit with yarn C, drop yarn B to the back and bring all to the front, ready to purl yarn A. All to the back, ready to start again. Knit with yarn B, bring yarn B to the front, knit with yarn C, drop B to the back, bring them all forward and purl with yarn A. Nearly there. Knit with yarn B, bring it to the front, knit with yarn C, drop B to the back, all to the front, purl with yarn A. And finally, one more time, knit with yarn B, bring it to the front and knit with yarn C, drop B to the back, all to the front and purl with yarn A. Nice and straightforward there. Now we get to the point in the swatch where we want to start creating our stitches, our sets of stitches with yarn C on the top layer. Now this goes CAB, it's still CAB, CAB, it's still the ABC sequence all the way across. This time we're going to knit with yarn C, bring it to the front, and then knit with yarn A. And then the easiest thing to do is drop C to the back, bring all forward so that we can purl with yarn B, and there it is, keeping it in that centralized position between the yarns A and C, just to make sure that nothing goes wrong. I'll show that again. So it's the same principle as before. Each time you're going to drop the one that you've got to the front already to the back before bringing them all forward to purl that last stitch. Knit with yarn C, bring it forward. Knit with yarn A, drop the yarn C to the back, bring all to the front, and purl with yarn B in its middle position there. Once again then we're going to knit with yarn C, bring it to the front and knit with yarn A, drop C to the back, bring all of them forwards and purl with yarn B, making sure it stays between the other two yarns. Knit with yarn C, bring it forward, knit with yarn A, drop C to the back, bring the rest of them forward, all of them forward in fact, and purl with yarn B. Knit with yarn C, bring it to the front, knit with yarn A, drop yarn C to the back, bring them all forward, and purl the third stitch of the set with yarn B. Those last three kinds of set were all you need to know if you're doing this kind of triple knitting in the round, because working in the round, you're always working from one side of the fabric. However, if you're working backwards and forwards, once you turn the fabric over, the colours and the order of the colours are now reversed. So I have rearranged my yarns on my finger to match the positions of the colours in the first section here, which is in a different order, but I'm still calling them yarn A, yarn B, and yarn C. So forget what the colour assignments were for the last set. Now we're working on the assumption that yarn A is the blue yarn B is the pink, and yarn C is the green. Blue, pink, green, A, B, C. This time, what has changed is the orientation of the middle layer. The middle layer faces the same direction as the top layer on the way out, Now it faces the same way as the bottom layer on the way round, because we've turned the work over, so what was a knitted layer before now becomes a purled layer. That means we change the order in which we make our stitches from knit, knit, purl, which is what we have been doing so far, to knit, purl, purl, and obviously that has a bearing on which yarns come forwards and backwards at which times, because we need to have the yarns in front of the needle in order to make a purl stitch. So this is how we work it, the sets of stitches with the yarn A on the top layer. On the return row, knit, purl, purl. We're going to knit the first stitch of the set and bring that yarn and the yarn B to the front, because we're going to purl with yarn B, like so, keeping yarn C at the back until now, when we can bring that one to the front as well and purl with it just like that. So I'll show you that again. Knit with yarn A, bring both A and B to the front so we can purl with yarn B in between the other two yarns there, keeping the same orientation, and then we can just bring yarn C to the front as well and purl with that. It's not too difficult, there's nothing particularly tricky with that, it is just different from what we were doing before. Knit with yarn A and B to the front, purl with yarn B, C to the front, purl with yarn C, yarns to the back, spread them out if necessary. Knit with yarn A and B to the front, purl with yarn B, C to the front, purl with yarn C. One more set like that. Knit with yarn A and B to the front, purl with yarn B, C to the front, and purl with yarn C. So you can see the principles are exactly the same, it's just that we need to bring a second yarn forward earlier so that we can purl that middle stitch. All the yarns to the back. Now this next set of stitches, or the next set of sets of stitches, are made with yarn B, the yarn in position B, on the top layer of the fabric. So we've got BCA working top, middle and bottom. This time we are going to knit with yarn B, bring B and C to the front so that we can purl with yarn C. And then we're going to bring A to the front as well and purl with yarn A. Take all the yarns to the back. Nothing particularly tricky about that either. We're going to knit with yarn B. B and C come to the front, purl with yarn C. And then we can bring A to the front as well and purl with yarn A for the third stitch of the set. One more time. Knit with yarn B, B and C to the front, purl with yarn C, add A to the front as well, and purl with yarn A. Knit with yarn B, B and C to the front, purl with yarn C, bring A to the front, and purl with yarn A, completing the set. Knit with yarn B, B and C to the front, purl with C, A to the front, ready to purl the last stitch of the set with it. And one more time, knit with yarn B, B and C to the front, purl with yarn C, and yarn A to the front and purl with it. And all the yarns return to the back. Now this final section we want to create our sets with yarn C on the top. So firstly we're going to knit with yarn C, and we want to bring it and yarn A to the front. To do that you go behind yarns A and C, missing out B completely, and as you go into the next stitch to purl it, it's important to just make sure that your yarn B is in fact behind the left hand needle, and as we purl that second stitch we need to make sure we do it by going behind the yarn C, the green yarn there, so we can purl the blue one there, Then we drop everything to the back and then bring everything to the front so we can get yarn B in place to purl it there. And then all yarns go to the back once more. So it's the same sort of principle. This time we're dropping 2 to the back to bring the third one to the front. Knit with yarn C, bring A and C to the front, purl behind yarn C with yarn A, drop everything to the back, bring everything to the front, and then purl yarn B there to complete the stitch and take the yarns to the back. One more time. Knit with yarn C, A and C to the front, and purl behind yarn C with yarn A, drop everything to the back, bring it to the front, purl with yarn B. And finally, one more time, show you that one more time there. Knit with yarn C, A and C to the front, purl A behind yarn C, bring everything to the back and then to the front, purl yarn B. So one last time then, we are going to knit with yarn C, bring A and C to the front, purl yarn A behind yarn C, drop it all to the back, bring everything to the front, and purl yarn B in the center position there. And that is the 6 ways of making the sets of stitches for flat triple knitting with the yarns held in the left hand. Zip!